Hello everyone, welcome to Shelf Space. I'm your host, Rodimus13, and today we are reviewing the HG Build Divers Re-Rise Earthree Gundam. That's right, we're reviewing it, not unboxing it. I decided to skip the unboxings for some of the HG kits, because I figure you're not finding them super interesting, but I will keep on doing unboxings for some of the larger ones as they come along. But anyway, this is something new, and I'm super excited to show it off to you guys. So let's get started. But first, we're going to look at the box. So as you can see, we got a really cool illustration of the Earthree Gundam, or the core Gundam with Earth armor. And it's kind of three forms, if you will. Here it is in its like main combined form. And then here is the core Gundam itself. And then over here is the Earth armor flying around in its little flying form. And it says Earthree Gundam, Hiroto's mobile suit, Bandai Spirits 2019, blue Bandai logo, a little code thing to scan. I guess that'll send you to probably not the Gundam info page. I want to say I remember hearing that at least in Japan there's a YouTube page specifically for Gundam stuff. On this side, we got some cool photographs of the kit all painted up, looking really nice. Mine doesn't look quite as nice as this, but I'm still happy with how it turned out. And there's English stuff on here, and you can read that if you want. We got the core Gundam, the Earth armor, it all combined, showing all the different things it can do. And then talking about how if you buy them all, you can combine them together and do crazy things, like make it look like Kikaider. Yes, Tokusatsu reference, guys. Anyway, on this side, we got the same illustrations as before. They've moved things around a little bit so it all fits on the side panel, which tells me that each of these are their own individual layer of illustration, which, as a designer, I find that interesting. The rest of you guys, maybe not as much. So we still got the HG Build Divers logo. And something that I'd like to point out, the I in Divers is lowercase. And you may not be able to see it as easily in here, but the same is true for the logo. And that calls back to how in the anime, they quickly changed the name from Build Divers with a capital I to Build Divers with a lowercase I. And I think it's a very cool design element to throw that in there. BandaiHobby.net, blue Bandai logo, 001. On this side, we have another painted illustration and a little write-up. You guys can read that if you want. And then information about the anime. And then your usual don't do things with this with your little kids, because it could hurt them. I'm not going to steal Shoki's bit. And still no yen listing price. And I don't understand why it's shifted over to the side like this. It doesn't make any sense. By this point, they've had time to adjust their templates. So why is that blank? It's not even that big of enough an area where they could let somebody put a little sticker there, I would think. It is weird from a designer standpoint. On this side, it's the same as the other, and that is the box. And I think we've had enough of the box. So let's actually take a look at the figure and the armor itself. And here's the figure that... hold on a sec. He's small. Much better. All right. Yeah, I didn't need to do that, but I kind of wanted to show off to you guys that this guy, this is the core Gundam itself, is absolutely tiny. Quick reference. Just happen to have a standard HG. This is Astaroth Origin from IBO. And yeah, he comes up to like its waist. And IBO kits aren't even that super tall. He like barely comes up to the knee on a master grade too. So yeah, he's a tiny boy, but Let's get this centered a little bit more. But he's still packed with articulation and personality, I think. He looks pretty interesting, and I dig it. Give him a little turnaround. His colors are a little bit muted. So like there's no like standard Gundam blue or anything like that. And even his reds and yellows feel kind of desaturated. The red is more of a warm orangey red, and the yellow is kind of an orangey yellow. So it gives him kind of a unique look, I think. Let's do articulation on him real quick. And as always, we will start with the head. So here's a good look at the head. Just wish my lights didn't, make it look like his eyes were in shadow, because he's got, the green foil sticker thing on. His head is a fairly standard looking Gundam head. The little vents on the side with the Vulcan cannons kind of call back to the Strike Gundam, at least in my opinion. Though the white V-fin is decidedly RX-78-2, the Grandpa Gundam. So there isn't a whole lot of exciting things going on with the head, at least in this form. It's on your standard neck polycap joint. So you got a ball up in the head that allows for rotation and looking around. And not a whole lot's going to bump into it. Though things are so tight, at least on my copy, that if I try to turn the head too much, the polycap neck thing will try to rotate with it. This little yellow collar piece likes to move around a little bit more than I would care for on my copy. Though I pushed it down earlier and now it seems to be behaving itself, so maybe I just needed to give it a little bit more force. But because of the double jointed thing, you can do the turkey neck. And yeah, rotate it around so you can see. He's got, a camera in the back as well. Two little lines there for detail, I'm guessing, because I haven't seen it do anything else with those. Though it could be future armors maybe will use those to help clamp other parts down. You do unfortunately have a big old seam going down the side of it. That's pretty typical for an HG kit, but a little disappointing nonetheless. Though it's more of a nitpicky thing if you ask me. You got a camera sticker up in the forehead, and of course the eyes, as I pointed out earlier. But the chin and the red parts underneath the eyes are all an interconnected piece, with the little mask being a separate piece to put on there. So at least you're not putting sticker details on for those, and that is greatly appreciated. You also have a tiny red piece for the jewel up there. So color separation, still pretty darn good. Now let's take a look at the rest of the figure. So articulation is actually pretty impressive for such a tiny package. His shoulders have the butterfly polycap joint, so you can do a little bit of moving up. You can also slide out the shoulder. This is primarily for transformation, but it does allow for even more movement, so you can fake things a little bit more. And the fact that you have that little sliding joint there is also pretty impressive if you ask me. But he can rotate his arm all the way around, bring it out like that. You got bicep swivel, a double jointed elbow with a really nice bend, and your standard ball socket joint wrist, which allows for rotation and waggle. In the torso, he has no ab crunch. When building him, it looks like he maybe had the ability for it or something like that, because there are sort of cavities that weren't used for anything, but for whatever reason he doesn't have that. He does have a waist joint that allows for some rotation, but he will collide with basically his crotch armor. And something to note on the backpack, this little thruster bell keeps trying to fall off on me if I touch it too much. I am probably going to glue that at some point. There is articulation here where these can rotate up, but that is primarily for the transformation mode, so we will worry about those later. These things rotate up like skirt armor. You can even separate them. I decided not to because they're so tiny. I was worried about what would happen to them. And at least in this form, it doesn't really affect things because you can kick up pretty darn high. And he's got a single jointed knee in this form. We'll get to that comment later. With a little bit more than 90. And an ankle joint that's kind of interesting because you got the joint here and then a joint down here that's a sort of a ball and socket, but mostly for ankle tilt. But that does mean he can get a pretty wide stance. Speaking of which, let's see. We can't quite do a full splits though. The way the hip is designed just won't allow for that. Though really, oh, and also he's got a rotation there. So like I said, this is pretty darn impressive for such a tiny little kit. And it does carry over when we combine things together. But now that we've looked at him, let's start taking a look. This is where my tongue stops working. Let's start taking a look at his accessories. All right, so to start off, we'll take a look at his shield. And truth be told, I don't care for this thing too much, at least in this form. And even in its other form, I have some criticisms with it. My main problem with it is that the way he has to hold it. Because basically he has to hold it like a gun. There's no peg hole for him to side mount it or anything like that. So if you want him to hold his shield, it has to be like that or like this. And I just don't care for that look. Next up, we got his little beam rifle. I think technically it's, in this form, it's a beam spray gun, but I don't know for certain. It does have a little, the light will catch it and the camera will focus. A little foil sticker on the front. Come on. And this actually looks pretty decent. It's very angular and has some nice surface detail on it. You do have a seam over the top, but the way they sandwiched things together and made it, it's not nearly as noticeable as it is on some other kits. So, yay for them on that. And it just slots into the hand. That's something else that I like about this kit is that the way they made it for attaching the weapons, you don't have to disassemble the hand in order to put them in. And it's pretty secure. No rattle, it ain't going nowhere. Let's see. Oh, we got this little backpack piece. And what you do with this is you just mount it up here, and then you can just mount the shield to it. Oh, there's a little peg, sorry. So you can just mount the shield like that for storage on his back. So, yay for weapon storage, at least in that respect. He also has this piece, which technically this factors into his armored form, and he doesn't really use it unless you're adding the some extra weapons to it. Focus. But it also acts as sort of a backpack adapter. So this is Probably not going to get a whole lot of use on this particular kit, but I'm definitely going to hold on to this as something for my parts bin. And finally, we do have beam sabers on this dude. Take these off. When you transform him, you can actually flip these up, but you can pop them off. We'll only do one for the purposes of this review. And he comes with a total of 4 beam saber blades. One is long and one is short. And that just slots into his hand like that. The long beam saber looks a little bit ridiculous on him. I kind of dig it though. In fact, I'm getting a picture of that, because that's actually kind of a cool looking shot. Okay. There is one other accessory, if you will. And that is this thing. This is the Earthree armor in its sort of flyer mode. And this is the part where we're going to talk about it. So all the parts that make up the Earthree armor combine together to make this little spaceship looking thing. And I have to admit, for something that's basically a jumble of parts, it looks pretty decent and cohesive. And it comes with a little stand thing that you can attach if you want for maximum swooshage. Swoosh, swoosh. But yeah, this is actually pretty cool looking in my book. Maybe I'm just way too easy to please, but I'll dig this thing. Ah. That came off a little bit way too easy. There we go. In the anime, it does show him riding around on this thing, but there are no foot pegs or anything, at least that I was able to find, to sort of secure him on there. But it happens so much in the anime, I feel like there's got to be something I'm missing, but there's nothing in the instructions and nothing super obvious. So it's something that I'll probably play around with, and if I figure anything out, I'll post another video to show it off. But let's go ahead and start getting this thing taken apart and see what the actual Earthree Gundam looks like. Okay, so the way we transform this thing is we basically just take it apart. Yes, it is very much, very decidedly a parts former. And for this kind of transformation, that's just sort of the thing you're going to have to accept. Okay. Having to remember how all this stuff goes off. Some little parts here. And what these are will become a lot more obvious once we start combining him all together. This is the part that's a little tricky, because at least putting them on is difficult, because you have to kind of wedge them into place and then slide them into position. Once we strip all that off, we are left with this, and as far as I can tell, they don't do anything with this, which is a shame. If I were the one designing this, I would have figured out some way to basically turn this thing into a gun or a sword or part of the backpack or something, because it just seems a shame to have basically this little flight block left. It kind of reminds me of how most HG versions of the Zeta Gundam and its variants go, where basically in order to do the transform mode, you have to take off parts and put it onto a basically big block of plastic. So if I had to level a criticism against the kit, this would be one of them. All right, and here he is with all the armor bits sort of laid out, and he's ready to go. And I kind of dig this, so I'm going to take another picture of this. Okay, so let's get started on getting him all together. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to unkneel him. I'm also going to adjust the camera a little bit so that way it's a little bit more natural for me to do this. I'm going to go ahead and take his backpack off. The instructions do not tell you to do this, but in my experience, I've had to transform this guy a couple of times. It makes things a lot easier. Okay, so we're going to now kind of tug on his shoulders and expand them out. You see you now have a little bit more space there. We're also going to lift his arms up. Now this is always a pain. Kind of have to force the issue a little bit. There we go. And then this part goes on top to sort of secure everything down. Whoop. Got away from me for a second. And now we'll repeat that on the other side. This is like the hardest part, at least for me. There we go. Okay, let's go ahead and do the legs. So you take the feet, and just like in the anime, he points his toes straight down, and you'll see there's now a little peg, or not peg, a little slot right there underneath his ankle guards, which corresponds to a peg inside the legs. And then you just push them in, and they connect pretty darn solid, actually. And that, spoiler alert, is something that I've noticed with this. He is actually, in his combined form, a very solid figure. I'm not going to attach the skirt armor. So there's little holes here, and they peg into little pegs on the underside of the little yellow bits. And we just fold that down. Skirt armor, got a peg, hole, put it together. Now he's starting to look more like a real HG. We're going to pop his fist off and set those aside for right now. Let's go ahead, put his shoulders on. Those just slide on. There's little pegs here, and they just slide into the slots in his shoulders. And again, everything is pretty darn solid. Now we're attaching the forearms. And basically you see there's a little peg right there, and it just goes into the hole for the fist. Speaking of which, there are new fist covers, and when I was building this thing, I could have sworn that I saw stuff that said that you would have to take off a back plate on the fist and attach the new one, and I was going to be all upset about that. But actually, no, you just attach this on top of what's already there. So I was very pleasantly surprised and happy to be wrong about that. Okay. Oop. Come on, I was just talking about how solid you are, and then you're going to fall apart on me? I have taken this guy apart a couple of times, though, so this is probably one of those things where you'll eventually want to just sort of pick a pose and stick with it. Okay, so this just clips onto the front, and again, very solid. On the back, we're going to go ahead, reattach his backpack, and then we can flip these up so now they're in a more traditional Gundam pose. And then this part, like this, sorry, just sort of goes up And pegs in. There we go. Now for the shield, we take his little shield from the core mode, the bigger shield, take that, and we're going to get to something that I do not care for on this. And if given a chance, I may change this. You have to rotate the fist, peg it into the side, and you see this little thing? This has to go into the fist, which means when you mount his shield, he can only have his hands in this position, and it's fighting me on this. Come on. Is it because I said I didn't like it? Is that why you're doing this? There we go. And that's the only way he can hold his shield, which means his fist is permanently in that direction while holding it, and I don't care for that. I understand why they did it, but I really would have rather there had been a hinge or something there. Finally, we're going to assemble the gun together like that, and you take these and kind of reposition them. Basically, you pull them, you unplug them, and then plug them back in a little bit further back to have them be more extended. And there he is. And I have to say, I really like this. And he's fairly solid. That shoulder's giving me problems. But yeah. That's actually really weird because I was messing with him the other day and he was just fine. But like I said, I did disassemble this guy, so he may have lost some of his tolerances a little bit. But overall, I just undid that again. Overall, he's pretty cool. His limbs are a little bit thin in some parts, making him seem a little bit overly lanky for your sort of standard hero suit. Zoom in a little bit on him. But I dig this. He's very cool looking. You don't really lose any articulation. In fact, if anything, you gain some, because now he's got a double jointed knee. So I think this is a very, very clever design. And the ankle tilts on this thing are off the chart. A thing you can do if you want, and let's see if I can do this without popping things off. You'll see that there's a hole and a peg here, and you can connect it together for a sort of super blast mode. I can't remember exactly what the purpose of this was, but you even have an extra camera thing there. So you can have them posed like this. And admittedly, that doesn't look too bad. He is off-centered, though, because I'm not paying attention to what's on the camera. Take another picture. So yeah, the only complaints I have are you get this left behind. His limbs are a little bit on the thin side in this form, and I don't care for how they do the little handles on the shield. But other than that, this is amazing. Especially considering that for a very, very gimmicky kit, it could have been garbage. We've seen that before, where they make all sorts of sacrifices for the purpose of him doing something cool, and it doesn't really make up for it. So I am happy with this, and I would recommend this to anybody who wants to make Gunpla. And what's also neat about this is, unlike other Build Series kits, he is a completely 100% unique figure. There are no reused parts from other things. I mean, the beam sabers might be reused, because this is what, SB9 from, 2007. But, I mean, what kit doesn't reuse somebody else's beam sabers? So yeah, highly recommended, I think. And I am looking forward to getting others. I do actually have the V2 kit on order. Amazon had it listed for an insanely low price for pre-order a little while back, and I jumped on that because I figured, why not? So yeah, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that fun YouTube stuff. Check the description below to see links to my storefront where you can get official Shelf Space t-shirts and more. And yeah, I'll see you the next time you invade my shelf space.